Hello, everybody. Welcome along to our Song of Ice and Fire reread. And we did actually no conversation. We had no conversation about the book before we started. We've just been nattering as usual. So sorry we're late. We're discussing all the way from Tyrion 9 to Dany 6 today. This is our last Dany chapter until we get to A Dance with Dragons, which will probably be about September, October, probably October. So next week we'll be reading or discussing all the way from Jaime 9 to Jon 11. So it's 5 chapters next week, and then the last week it'll be 6 chapters. So 5 with the epilogue, and so that'll be 6. Yeah, there we go. So Tyrion 9. We have the trial this week. It's an action-packed week. I feel like there's very little kind of theory in this week. What do you think, Claire?
Oops, yeah, sorry, I've turned the sound off because of the washing machine. Well, it's I suppose coming to the end of the book, so there's lots of, there's a trial, there's jail time, there's being dragged off to a cell up at the wall, there's there's lots of action going on, for sure.
There's actually a lot of imprisonment in these. I think that, like, because that could be our theme, imprisonment.
Yes,
for sure, because Jaime is kind of imprisoned by the debts that he needs to pay, I guess, and Sansa is going to be imprisoned at the Eyrie, and Jon and Tyrion, obviously, and Dany, I guess, Jorah is imprisoned.
Yeah. So there's like exile and betrayal and all that juicy stuff going on.
And we've only had 6 Dany chapters in this entire book, so it's been like quite but a lot has happened to her, I guess. It's kind of, I feel with Dany especially with between now and Winds, I guess it's just waiting for the dragons to become big so that we can kind of see them grow up. So so let's jump straight into Tyrion 9, and this is basically all the pre-trial action, Tyrion trying to mount a defense of some sort, and Kevin, a lot of interactions with Kevin. We see a lot more of Kevin in this chapter, and I guess the next time we'll see Kevin, this much interaction with Kevin would be the last chapter in Dance, I guess, the epilogue of Dance. And I don't have a huge amount for this chapter, because I feel like it's the next chapter that we'll want to talk about. Hey, Bran, how are you? And the only thing I wanted to ask you was, why do you think Tywin wanted Tyrion to go to take the Black? Was it just to save Lannister reputation, or did he have other reasons?
He did seem particularly angry, didn't he? That that didn't happen. I think he's such a control freak. He wants his own way, and he wants to place his children in certain situations. And I don't think he hates Tyrion. I think there's like almost like a mild grudging respect for him, in a way. And I don't think he does want. I mean, there's something that Kevin says later on when he says, "Your father didn't want to kill you. He just wanted to." He just wanted you out of the way, kind of thing. So, I don't think he wants to harm Tyrion. I think he just got extremely pissed off that he didn't get his own way, which was to just move him up to the wall.
I think he wanted a Lannister in the north. That's what I'm thinking. It would bring Tyrion that bit closer to Winterfell if there came a situation where they needed Winterfell, or they could get into Winterfell. I know the Boltons have Winterfell right now, but I wonder how close that relationship is for Tywin. I feel like Kevin is loyal to a fault. And I feel like Tyrion takes after his uncle a lot in that regard, because even Tyrion is still very loyal and stupidly loyal to people, or depending on the loyalty of people like Varys and Bronn, who couldn't care less. Like, they have their own agenda. And it is really upsetting that the only person on his list that he can really trust is Sansa Stark. And it just speaks volumes
They think a lot about each other, actually. Tyrion thinks about Sansa quite a bit. He thinks about whether or not she's capable of killing Joffrey. He thinks about, you know, maybe she could have done with some help. And he also he feels angry that she's gone because she's broken her marriage vow. He's quite traditional in a way sometimes, Tyrion. You know, she's broken wedding vows by vanishing, which just irritates him. And then later on, Sansa kind of has some interesting thoughts about Tyrion as well.
Yeah.
So it's weird.
So I don't think there's much that stuck out to me other than that. Just wondering why Tywin. I mean, maybe he does love him. I guess. I mean, it's certain. Like Oberyn certainly seems to suggest in the next chapter that the murder of Ilya is down to the slight Tywin felt at the Martell rejection of Tyrion, and it would be. It's the first time someone would have rejected Tyrion. It wouldn't be the last time, but maybe the first time hurts the most. So he holds on to that slight a little bit more. So, and he's still a Lannister, for Tywin even at this stage. Was there anything in particular that stuck out for you in this chapter?
Just the details of the, you know, you can remember the big points of the story. Like if somebody said to you, describe what happens at the Red Wedding, you can probably describe it in a fair amount of detail, but there's just little things that like, oh God, yeah, it didn't occur to me. But of course that's the case, that people are actually out looking for Sansa and there's a great big reward for finding her.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, I just thought she kind of went and disappeared and everyone was like, oh damn, you know, I kind of forgot about those sort of details.
Are people still, I guess people are still looking for her going into Winds then.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is funny. It's like the way we forgot about Beric until that.
Yes. Yeah.
There's groups out there doing their thing.
So yeah, I mean, before we get to, I mean, there's just one thing to note that, and again, it could be probably something really ridiculously insignificant, but Bron is described as, because he has quite a few visitors coming to see him in this chapter. So Kevin, and then Pod goes off and finds Bron, who now is going to be married to Lolis, and he's described by Tyrion as having a wolfish smile, which I just thought, is that something? Would you just describe somebody as having a wolfish smile, or is there something loaded into that description? Yeah. I don't know. There's just little things like that are like, wolfish, George. What's that?
So our theory is broad as Benjamin.
But could he be from the north somehow?
I really like the idea that he's a Rain.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll ever happen, but I really like the idea.
Yeah.
That he's a Rain.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's got Lolis, which he's happy with. Yeah, but
well, yeah.
We know what happens for Lolis's sister later in the books, but I don't have much for this chapter. As I said, and most of it is going to come with Oberyn in the next chapter.
Well,
Oberyn is quite cryptic here.
There's a few things in terms of the trial. It kind of goes on for about 2 or 3 days. So this is the first day, and everybody trooping in to the trial is, you know, has been primed by Cersei clearly. But there's a description of Marjorie, you know, the twice widowed thing with Marjorie, and like, oh, you know, she can't, like, that's it, Joffrey's gone, so she's now going to have to marry Tom. And it just reminded me a little bit of Kat and Ned and Brandon, like, oh right, that's one brother gone, who's the next one? It is very, and we know how grasping the Tyrells are. So if you think about, like, just what was Hoster up to, there's just something about that guy that just makes me think he's even worse than Tywin.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Especially the way Lysa talks about him in the Sansa chapter.
Yes, yeah.
So, you know, that's when we find out
So it's interesting that because there's I mean, this all links into what's coming up with Oberyn, but there's some clues in here possibly about the different potions that are being used. And Pycelle, when he's asked to give evidence against Tyrion, which everyone does, everyone comes out, everyone's pushed out. The King's Guard completely dropped Tyrion in the shit about some of the stories that have happened, you know, and it's just complete propaganda. And I mean, you can imagine how Tyrion's feeling at this point, with everyone laughing as well in the court. But Pycelle turns up and starts talking about all these different potions, and one of them is a cruel potion called Widow's Blood that shuts down the bladder and the bowels until a man basically drowns in his own filth, in his own poison. That, to me, sounds like what happened to Tywin much later on. So there is this theory, this argument that it wasn't Tyrion that killed Tywin, it was something else. And also in this chapter, when the Red Viper comes to see Tyrion, he kind of alludes to, well, you know, your father may not live forever.
Yeah, and I don't think the Viper would have gone into the trial by combat, leaving any possibility for Tywin not to get his comeuppance in case he died. As talented as he is, he also knows what he's up against at the mountain. So I don't think he would have left it to chance.
So we're saying it's pretty obvious here that somehow the Red Viper was poisoning Tywin.
So. Also,
whatever the outcome of the trial.
Yeah, we get that line in the next chapter about it looked like Tywin's face looked like he drank poisoned wine.
Yeah.
So I think it's entirely possible.
Yeah.
Did Oberyn have a seat on the council?
Yes, he did.
So he would have had plenty of opportunity.
Yeah. And I also think there's reference later on to Tywin and the Red Viper having, like, you know, he'd invite him over for supper and things like that, and they would like talk about political things, and the same with Tyrell as well. He'd have, like, you know, supper with them. But I think Oberyn had quite easy access to Tywin,
and definitely probably picked up sleight of hand in his many travels.
Yeah, Renaissance man.
Yeah, Sonny totally agrees that the Viper already poisoned Tywin. I try and talk, not Irish, I'm saying poisoned. So yeah, I do think so. And when you get to the next chapter, even in this chapter, I think it's pretty obvious that had we had more time with Oberyn, I liked the fact that the TV show did more with his character. I think Tyrion has met his match with him intellectually, and I think Tywin probably did too. So it's a shame. I mean, I definitely prefer book Doran than show Doran, but not the actor. I actually like the actor in the show. He just wasn't. The character was terribly characterized for the show. But Oberyn is incredibly intelligent, incredibly skillful in anything that he touches. So yeah, it's. I think he did. I think it's definitely. It's. I think it's something that we don't ever need to have confirmed, because I think it's definitely, unless Shay is a secret Dornish woman that potentially knows more about it.
Maybe.
Yeah. So hello, Sonny, Bran, AU, thank you for coming.
Hi.
So is there anything else from this chapter that you wanted to talk about? Sorry, I've been like, I didn't have a huge amount for this chapter.
Do you think that, I mean, Oberyn is alluding to like what he thinks might happen after the trial, and you know, in a successful outcome, that Marcella, and he completely just wants to carve the Tyrells out of any kind of power play. So what his plans are to champion Marcella as Queen of Dawn, after marrying Trystane. Do you think that Cersei would have allowed that to happen?
I mean, in the books, it can still happen.
It could still happen. Yeah. Yeah.
Over Tommen? Maybe. Maybe. Although I think she just wants the throne for herself. I will say though, that's an example of how the Martells outsmarted Tyrion. That was clearly the plan all along. Because they could have taken Tommen.
Yeah.
But they knew probably that Myrcella would be underestimated as a woman. She's also the second born, so they've got like the age claim there. So I think I don't know, would Cersei support if I don't know if there came a contest with the Faith. Maybe if the Faith took King's Landing and Cersei managed to get out, maybe. But I don't know. I think Tommen is way more pliable and open to manipulation. He's a sweeter kid. Not that Myrcella isn't, but
I suppose it's whether or not she's that interested in power gained through her children, or championing the plight of women politically in this environment, in that she's always lamenting that she was the one that was born a woman, and that she should have been the one that was firstborn and heir to Castle Rock and blah 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 and what have you. That she's the
Jaime brings that up, doesn't he, in his chapter?
Yes, and as does Littlefinger about how Cersei's not a player. Yeah. So I just think, I don't know, like how...
It is, I mean, there's definitely an argument for it, because she's definitely worried about that younger, more beautiful queen. So if Marjorie gets her hooks into Tommen, then maybe he's not as easy to control. So maybe she would throw her weight behind Myrcella.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Tyrion is completely conflicted about that.
Yeah.
To the point where he's almost glad he's in that situation, that he doesn't need to make that decision.
Yeah.
Hey, Jules. Jules also agrees that he poisoned him. It seems there's definitely something wrong with Tywin, for sure. He's not a man who's happy on his throne, if you know what I mean. So anything else then from Tyrion 9?
No.
So again, I think the next Tyrion chapter is the big one. So Jaime 8 then, I love this. I have to say, I know you said it before, you're not a massive fan of Jaime chapters. Isn't that right? I think you said that before. I really, really like Jaime chapters. I don't know why. I always like, I feel like he's so conflicted, and he's such a character. You're there, you're going, oh, I really like Jaime. You're like, no. He pushed a kid out the window. You do not like Jaime. Okay, just keep reminding yourself that. So when I get to the end of a Jaime chapter, I just have to visualize Bran being thrown out a window. But I do like him here. We learn about the White Book. I think it was mentioned before, but we learn a lot about Barristan the Bold, which is a great kind of lead-in for Dany's chapter. And also we won't see Barristan for a whole other book, so it's good to kind of learn a bit more about him here. 10 is when he was in his first tourney, is that right? He was 10 years old, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he was very young.
Yeah. Like, at 10 years old, I was still playing with Barbie. Well, probably not Barbie, probably a Pound Shop ripoff, but do you know what I mean? It's at 10 years old, I can't even imagine it. But anyway, it seems like he's hiding from Tyrion. He is, AU doesn't like Jaime either. I just like his chapters as a character. No, I like the character as well, I guess.
Yeah, Tyrion doesn't seem to realise that Jaime's around, does he? Tyrion's just like lurking in the background at the trial and things.
Do you think Jaime is hiding from Tyrion? He doesn't want Tyrion to call him. He's too afraid, either in case he realizes Tyrion is guilty, or realizes he's not guilty, which would be even worse. I mean, in the end, he goes with the not guilty.
There's also that immediate fear of he's going to ask me to be his champion, and I can't do that. So that exposes me again, because he's trying to, what Jaime's trying to do here in this chapter is instill a bit of fear into the remaining king, into Tommen's Kingsguard now, the remaining Kingsguard, who he's looking at as like, this is just, you know, what I've been left with. But also it's interesting the exchange that he has with Loras at the end, and how he recognises, wow, this is like me. This is like having to deal with a young version of me. But I think it's more because probably a number of things. I think he wants to maybe make his own mind up about whether Tyrion really did do that or not. But I also think it's mainly because he doesn't want anyone to point the finger at him in a pitiful way. He wants to instill this fear as even if it's pretense, as the new Lord Commander.
Yeah, and in fairness to him, Jules has actually made a really good point. I did end up enjoying Jaime's POVs after he lost his hand and comes to terms with how he views himself. I really hated him at the beginning. I enjoyed him from the beginning, and I think you're right, Jules. And what I really like about Jaime, unlike Tyrion, who wallows in self-pity from now until the next time we see him and wins, he'll probably still be wallowing in self-pity. Jaime has literally got back up on the horse almost straight away and decided, no, a lot of that, to be fair, is down to Brienne and what Brienne has taught him, which is why that meeting with Loras in this chapter is so great, where he doesn't tell Loras everything that Brienne has said. He kind of gives him bits of information at a time so that Loras can come to the conclusion that the story he has in his head about Renly's death isn't the story. It doesn't make sense. It's very similar to when Kat is having that conversation with Jaime about Bran, about the stabbing of Bran, and then he realizes she realizes that doesn't make any sense. None of that makes sense. And he's very good at kind of saying, just say it in your head, and then you realize he's very bad at doing that with himself, but he's very good at doing that with other people. And Loras I think he has the ingredients to be a great leader, actually, despite his shortcomings or his short arm.
Yeah. He's doing his duty, isn't he? And he's got his father's words ringing in his ears, so he just feels as though he's got to roll his sleeves up and just do a decent job, do what he's there to do. And
he reads all of the capabilities and what the different kind of members of the Kingsguard can offer. He reads them very well. Like, we as readers already know, Meryn is an arsehole, Boris is terrible. We know all of these things, and he's able to read them very, very well. And he kind of rewards Balon Swan a little bit here as well. Because it's Balon Swan, that was really, he was trying to give favorable testimony for Tyrion, but it ended up actually damning Tyrion more than anything. Adding more weight behind other testimony that went against Tyrion. But Jaime's very good at kind of recognizing that this is a guy that we can get on board with. And also with Kettleblack, he's able to kind of instantly go, this guy is not up to no good. Although he does come from a very kind of classist point of view. This guy is lowborn and not sure if he should be here, and that kind of thing, which is a bit, to be expected, I guess, from Lannisters. Sonny says if Jaime thought about it, he would have to admit that either his brother or his father killed his son. Yep, that is very true. And we kind of agreed last week that we think his father was probably involved or turned two blind eyes when he found out about the plot. He just kind of let it go. Which is maybe why Oberyn was able to get in there as well under the radar and kill and poison Tywin.
He just did. Like, he wouldn't have seen that coming.
They're going to get rid of Joff, so let them get rid of Joff. But so sorry. Anything about Jaime's chapter that you want to discuss?
A reference to the White Book being about 1,000 pages thick.
Oh, I missed it.
Yeah. And just, I know you mentioned it before that he started when he was young, but Barristan's just epic, glorious career entered into the White Book, and the fact that Jaime kind of just smiles when he realizes that Barristan even wrote about his dismissal.
Oh, did he? Like, yeah. Of course he did, yeah.
And that he was aged 61, which actually isn't. I think I always imagined Barristan being like really quite old, like in his 70s, by the time he's kind of over with Daenerys and serving with Daenerys. But he's 61 isn't that old at all.
No.
So he's still fighting, he's still fighting fit.
60 is the new 40.
It is, yeah. I hope so, anyway.
That's what I told my husband today. I was like, 50 is the new 30, don't worry about it. So that means that 36, which I'll be turning in 2 weeks, is the new 16. There you
go. So we hear a lot about... Jaime thinks about his past and his history and how he always wanted to be that true knight. He always wanted to be like, Sword of the Morning, some heroic hero knight. But somewhere along the way, he ended up like the Smiling Knight, who was this like vicious vagabond who was part of the Brotherhood. And so he often thinks about what it is to be a good knight, and how he kind of reminisces in a sad way about how when he was 15 he really did want to be a good knight. So there's always some form of redemption there, I think, for Jaime. He's always kind of just this mud sticks, it's this one thing about what happened with Aerys, and you can look at it from a number of different ways, but what could he have done in that situation?
It's like, but imagine serving under Arthur Dane and Barristan Selmy. Imagine having those two. I mean, Arthur Dane in particular, like he's everything every young boy wants to be. Mm-hmm. It'd be like if we were in close contact with Jess Face 90.
Yes.
like we want to be in terms of nail polish and swatching and all that kind of thing. But it's just, and cuticles, I'm constantly oiling. But yeah, it's just the shadow of Arthur Dane follows Jaime. Yeah. It's one of the reasons why it would be amazing if he was Mance, and if he was still alive. Because Jaime, I guess a lot of people would recognize who Arthur Dane is, but if he's changed his appearance at all, maybe Jaime is one of the few people that might be able to see through any kind of glamour or anything that's going on with him. But
so he's quite insecure, I think, at the moment, Jaime, and he's trying his best to kind of make his mark, particularly with the do your duty and the Kingsguard. But I mean, it's easy to feel insecure in that situation. You've got this book in front of you on this white like pedestal, and within it you've got counts of like Duncan the Tall, Gerald Hightower, Prince Aemon the Dragon Knight, and all of these amazing things that had happened. And then you get to Jaime's page and he's like slew King Aerys, pardoned by King Robert. And it's like, oh, okay. I do feel sorry for him in a little way in this chapter, but at the same time, I think that there's still a long way to go with Jaime. But I kind of, it's easy to feel sorry for him. Everything feels, the way he describes how he's feeling generally in himself, he's clumsy, everything just feels unnatural. He can't do what he used to do. He looks older, he's haggard, he's lost a lot of weight, he just doesn't look as formidable as he used to. And then he's confronted with this ridiculously capable 17-year-old Loras who's like in his face. So it's hard it's hard for him, but
it is. And I also think, though, a lot of what ails him comes from the fact that it's very difficult to serve honorably in a dishonorable administration, if you like, or a dishonorable family. I mean, as much as he goes, oh, why can't I be wedded to my sister? The Targaryen said that. I think in his heart of hearts, he knows that it's wrong what he's done with Cersei. There's a lot that he has a duty to serve, and he's already done so much to undermine that duty. Can we all take a minute just to hate on Bran for taking the dip in the pool? I'm going to joke on Bran. I'm just jealous. I'll just be jealous of you. Sonny and Barbara, we are going to talk about that when we get to Sansa's chapter for sure. I've written down your questions, so yeah, for sure. But I love the interaction with Loras. And I think at this stage, if anyone was in any doubt that there was a romantic relationship between Renly and Loras, it's very much kind of, you can read between the lines here that they were praying before Renly died, and it's clear, that he was all armored and everything when he was killed, so there's no way that Brienne could have killed him and all that kind of thing. And Jaime ends the chapter thinking about the debts that he still needs to repay, which is something I don't think Tyrion thinks a lot about. Lannisters always paid their debts, but I'm not entirely sure if he always does pay the debts that he owes. But Jaime is definitely thinking about it, and I think possibly the biggest one is Tysha. That's the biggest debt he has with Tyrion, which we'll see that unfold very, very soon. But that's probably the biggest one of his debts, right?
Yeah, sorry, I've just got it muted because the washing machine's on spin.
You can't hear it.
Really? It's really loud.
It's fine.
Yeah, no, that's it for me for Jaime's chapter. This was definitely the White Book chapter.
Yep. Okay, so we have the Sansa chapter, and this is where I should have cued OK Computer, Radiohead's Creep, because that's all this chapter is, absolute creepy. Littlefinger, who's the creepiest person in this Sansa 6? Littlefinger, Marillion, or Lysa? Because they're all creepy.
Yeah.
Just total creeps. And even like House Baelish, where they are on the fingers, it sounds horrible.
Yeah.
It sounds like a place you would never want to go back to. It's
dismal, forlorn, and desolate.
It's very it reminds me of Jane Eyre, when Jane Eyre first arrives at Rochester's house. It's a little bit like that, a kind of a mix between that and maybe Heathcliff's homestead. It's there's a lot of kind of gothic, seedy kind of desolate is a good way to describe it. These two old codgers looking after the place. Well, not old, an old codger and a woman who keeps squeezing out kids. And I just had the image from The Meaning of Life, the Monty Python Meaning of Life, with the Catholic woman just having the baby to watch them. Which I think we quote that song. I don't know why we do that. Every sperm is sacred. I love that. But anyway, So Sansa is very, very creepy, and he lies about Tyrion. And just coming off the Jaime chapter where Jaime says he's debts to pay, straight into this chapter with Sansa, and Littlefinger says that Tyrion married his first wife and gave her to his soldiers, and that he probably would have done the same to Sansa, which I don't think Sansa believes.
For me, this chapter this shows you how challenging it's going to be for Sansa from now on, because she's been told. If you imagine yourself in that situation and you think, that your mother's just died, and probably the closest connection that you're going to get is you being given the opportunity to meet up with her sister, your aunt, who you imagine is going to look after you and Lysa even says that a little bit later on, you know, you're my blood and I'll always look after you, kind of thing. But she's also saying, trust in Littlefinger, trust Peter, you know, you must listen to everything that he says and trust Peter. But yet Peter's telling her, don't shed any tears for the imp, you know, he did this, he did this, he did this, he did this. And but yet at the same time, if she was the kind of child that just listened to absolutely everything that adults were saying to her at the time, then she would completely listen to her auntie and she would trust in absolutely everything Peter Baelish was saying to her. He pulled her out of King's Landing and he rescued her. Yeah, it's a bit disappointing that this, you know, it was a bit of a trick that it was his home and not her home that they were sailing to. But I just think that there's many different purposes for this chapter. And I think that one of the most important ones is that it gives this exposes Sansa to Littlefinger's origins, his origin story, where he came from, who his ancestors were, where his shitty homestead is, and how he was able to climb up and manipulate certain situations. And he starts to tell her about, you know, and it's all, again, but all this kind of...
Your washing is done, Claire.
Thank you. This is positive confirmation around things like, good, very good, Sansa. Very clever. You're a clever girl and you're getting it and you're picking it up. And so he's definitely grooming her, probably for a number of different things, but she still seems to be, like when he says to her, shed no tears for the imp, and in that situation, she could really genuinely feel ecstatic to be free, to be rid of Tyrion. And yeah, you know, I can start again and I have this new name and new persona. I need to make my own home and Winterfell's not here anymore. So what do I do with my life? But she is already, to me anyway, even though she doesn't know who to trust at this point and she doesn't know if people are telling her the truth or not, she is starting to feel a bit more confident in her own judgments, I think. And I don't think she does trust Littlefinger. I don't think she does believe everything that he says. I think she's having a complete, like, slap in the face reality check around the role of women and Lysa and family relationships and all of that kind, you know. And I think this is probably the most that Sansa can learn about what the hell's going on in the Game of Thrones than any other chapter that we'll be exposed to with Sansa.
I mean, he even says the immortal line in this, you know, you play the Game of Thrones in this,
yes,
right?
Yeah,
and you're totally right. And let's not forget, there's, apart from the riot situation in King's Landing, there was never a threat of rape with Sansa in King's Landing. And I know she went through horrible things at King's Landing, but on her first night under the care of people she's supposed to trust, she's almost raped.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to go well, for sure. It's not going to end well for anyone. Maybe Sansa, though, because I think she has clued up. Also, as much as I love my wine, which is covered up to stop the flies getting in, as much as I love red wine, I would never offer it to somebody if they have a sick stomach.
I was thinking that, yeah.
Well, it does kind of lend itself to the theory you were discussing last week, that she was potentially poisoned or drugged in some way, or had some sort of residue of the poison on her that was kind of making her disorientated during the escape, because she notes that she's more than seasick. She's very sick. Yeah,
it's not just seasick. I think it's she's having a really bad, like, the menses again, you know, and this is just reinforcing Sansa is a woman. She's not a little girl. She's a woman fully grown, and she's just having, like, really bad PMS. That's what I think the stomachache is.
Because I wouldn't put it past Littlefinger to keep her slightly drugged. And that is why he doesn't get to give her the wine. I don't think he gets to give it to her. But it wouldn't surprise me if he was keeping her slightly drugged as well. Maybe not, but she's definitely beyond seasick for sure.
It's funny how both Tyrion and Sansa seem to be suffering from stomach troubles for very different reasons, but it's like physically that's where they're having problems, is in the gut, in the stomach. Tyrion, because he's on trial, and obviously it's like a nervous stomach, but they both, physically that's both where they're having problems.
So we find out pretty quickly, it's a pretty good payoff, that Olenna is behind the poisoning of Joffrey. And Sonny wants to know, why would Olenna poison a cup of wine that Marjorie was drinking from? And Barbara believes that Marjorie knew. I think maybe it could be possible that Marjorie knew and had an antidote. We've seen them do that in the show, for instance, that, with Ilaria. No, what's Oberyn's wife's name? It's Ilaria, right?
Yes, his paramour.
Mistress, his paramour. Yeah. Excuse me. So, Sonny says, what if the amethyst was the antidote to the strangler that Olenna had for Marjorie? So she drops in the antidote and not the poison. So potentially, but I think it seems to be suggesting that the Littlefinger seems to suggest that the poison is in the hairnet. But it's totally possible, Sonny. Yeah. I wonder, is it a case because Joffrey gulps down the wine because the pie is so dry? He doesn't drink it all.
Yeah.
I wonder, is it the case of that you can handle a tiny amount, but like exceeding a dose will kill you?
Well, in the trial, in Tyrion's chapter, again, you can't trust anything that Pycelle says, but I don't think it is Pycelle. I think it's one of the other Meisters. But somebody's performed an autopsy on Joff and found out that it wasn't the pie, that you didn't choke on the pie, it was actually poison.
But that they knew that the pie would cause him to drink more. Like they were certain he would drink more than Marjorie would, if you know what I mean. Like, because we haven't really heard much about Marjorie. We don't know how well she is. Has she been sick? We don't know for sure. So,
well, we know that her father, Tyrell, because Oberyn said we're reminded of it 50 times a day, like, my daughter could have died, my daughter could have died. So I think that's genuine, like, shit, whatever it was we were doing or we were involved in, this potentially could have brought Marjorie down at the same time. So, I think
he knew. I don't think he knew.
I think what's going on here is Littlefinger was manipulating the Tyrells. The Tyrells were in league with, so they had their mission, they had their mandate because of Littlefinger spreading, he's doing his, like, Joffrey's amazing, but getting all his guards to kind of spread shit about him in the camps. So this kind of, he's basically manipulating the situation so that the Tyrells, in particular Lady Olenna, felt that, okay, we can do this, we can take Joff out, we can then marry Marjorie to Tommen, that will be the better setup, that will be us basically marrying into power. I also think during this time that Olenna probably had some kind of separate plan going on with Tywin, and that fucked up somehow.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
So maybe it was like, okay, we get the, this is the plan, the poison goes here, you loosen this, this goes into this cup, this could, and maybe Marjorie, maybe they'd done some kind of risk assessment where Marjorie was like, okay, she takes the antidote regardless, and the antidote is the amethyst, or personally I think the amethyst was the poison. But I think that there was having a big plan like that comes with big risks, and maybe the fuck up was that Marjorie was exposed to that risk as well. But I think it's a combination of several things. I think it's a combination of Littlefinger manipulating the Tyrells way back, even when Renly was still alive, manipulating them. Then Lady Olenna and Tywin trying to outwit each other, but it not working. So I think Tywin wanted to get rid of Joffrey. I think Olenna wanted to get rid of. I think everyone wanted to get rid of Joffrey, and it was a combined effort that just kind of a plan within a plan within a plot that didn't quite. One element of it worked really well, another element of it didn't, and I think Littlefinger's trying to take a lot more credit for all of this.
Well, in fairness, though, is it Osmond or Oswell that hires the dwarf, kind of the skit that happens?
Yes,
he hires the players, so they didn't leave that up to chance. They knew they had to rattle Tyrion's cage to make a scene so that they'd have the opportunity to poison him. So it seems like they didn't leave that up to chance. They definitely, that took a lot of effort to sneak them in under Cersei's nose and make sure she didn't find out about it, because she had so much control over this wedding that to have that even happen is a big deal. So it is an interesting question. I think Marjorie didn't know, and they didn't expect her to drink from the cup, maybe, or else she did know and pretended to drink from the cup. But again, we don't know if she got a little bit sick. Definitely, I kind of like the idea that Sansa was a little bit sick because of the poison as well. Like if it's in her scalp, if it's near her scalp, it would kind of be slow release into her body. And we don't really know. I mean, Tyrell seems to be very upset. So I think he's either overacting or he just hadn't a clue. I don't think Olenna would have trusted him.
Well, Littlefinger talks about, this thing is mentioned that I don't think I've ever heard before, but it's mentioned in this chapter. Littlefinger refers to the Great Western Alliance. So we've heard of the Great Northern Conspiracy, and the Northern Lords and what have you, but Littlefinger here is referring to something called the Great Western Alliance. So that could be Tywin, Olenna, possibly even, well, probably just Olenna and Tywin, maybe Marjorie as well.
Well, would the Freys come under that umbrella as well, even though they probably weren't privy to that much information, but certainly they are now Lannister people.
That would a Western alliance, though, between Highgarden and Casterly Rock would make sense for what both Olenna and Tywin want.
It would also make sense that it would happen after Marjorie was married. Because they could have killed him at any time.
So the payoff is, let's get rid of this monster Joffrey. Let's put Tommen on the throne. Marry good Queen Marjorie, which means your family have got a play now in the royal family. They've got the power that they've always been grasping for generations. Tywin's thinking, I've now got a peaceful realm that I can rule fairly or justly, or however Tywin would want to rule the realm. He's done it before quite successfully. And that's what they were planning and plotting together. But Littlefinger was aware of it rather than manipulated it. Or the Great Western Alliance could just be those 3 Tyrells. It could just be Queen of Thorns and her 2 grandchildren. Loras, get him into the Kingsguard. And where he's in like the inner circle. And Marjorie, make her be, enable her to become queen. Those 3 all knew about this plan and plot, and maybe they're the Great Western Alliance, the Queen of Thorns and her grandchildren.
Would there be a Tarly influence in there as well? Because
it could be a lot bigger, yeah.
towards the Lannisters, so there could be something going on there. Barbara says Mace is out of the loop, but maybe Brother Garland helped. Yeah, that's totally possible. I wonder how much did Varys know before it happened? Yes, Barbara just said the same. Do you think Varys knew? Because Littlefinger mentions a couple of times in this chapter about the little birds, and Tyrion mentions it a few times when he's talking to Oberyn about the little birds. But it's as if Oberyn doesn't care. It's as if, and Littlefinger has found ways around it, but it's as if Oberyn doesn't care if Varys knows, because maybe, I don't know, because it seems as if Tywin was poisoned by Oberyn didn't confide in anyone. Oberyn did it alone. I think he had to have done it alone, because anytime there's a conspiracy, as soon as you have a secret between, if you add a third person to a secret, the secret's getting out. So if there's 3 people, and we know definitely that there's at least 3 people involved in Joffrey's murder, Littlefinger, Olenna, and the Kettle Black. So they're definitely involved. There's definitely more as well, but for sure we know there's 4. We know Dantas was involved as well. He knew something was going to happen. So it's going to get out eventually, that Tywin. If Tywin was involved, it'll get out. And I think that great scene that we had with Olenna and Jaime in season 7 will, if something similar like that happened in the book, where Olenna spilled all and to hurt the Lannisters, it'll come out, by the way, Tywin orchestrated this. So that's just what I think. But as to how much Varys knew, I don't know. It's hard to shock Varys. He was shocked about Ned, I think. That was the only time Littlefinger got the better of him. Varys is only ever shocked if Littlefinger gets the better of him. So if Littlefinger got the better of him here, then maybe he was shocked. But I think he would have just let it happen anyway. He wouldn't have intervened. Nobody liked Joffrey. So we also have Lysa here. It's a very different Lysa to the Lysa we met with Kat back at the Eyrie. She's like a petulant child, and she sounds horrifically unattractive from Sansa's point of view, even more so than from Tyrion's point of view. And she demands that Peter Tar marries her there and then. She's not waiting anymore. She wants another kid from him. And
yes, this word another is mentioned a couple of times, which again could be wildly taken out of context. Let's make another child.
So the child that she seems to be referring to is the one that they aborted, or that Hoster Tully had aborted. But I think it's Sweet Robin. I don't think it's. I think that it's his child. We also have a mention here of Littlefinger as a kid, which I completely forgot about this story. Littlefinger as a kid being brought to a green seer of some sort by his dad. And the dad kind of buying into the fact that, I think they said that Littlefinger was going to be a great man or some importer. And Littlefinger was like, well, yeah, I can just do that on my own. I don't need you to tell me that, kind of thing. Which, again, could be read in a couple of different ways. He's doing it on his own moxie and determination and blah, blah, blah. Or he's already getting clear visions of what his future entails from a young age, if he's able to, because he's very good at reading people and to judging people's moves and their next steps and things like that. So I do think he's a touch of kind of visionary power, which is passed on to child potentially with Lysa. And then we have one of 2 exciting sex scenes this week. Lysa and Peter. Did you listen to the Roy Dotrice version? Because for this chapter and for the John chapter, I listened to the Roy Dotrice version.
Yeah.
And I forgot how weird.
Yeah, it's very weird.
The way he does it, oh god. So and Marillion, what a gross character he is. It is ironic that Lothar has to save Sansa from a singer, because she buys into so many of the songs, or at least she did in the past, and she's kind of be saved from Marillion's songs, and just totally gross. Which is kind of like, I guess that's why she won't spend too much time worrying about what happens to him later on.
Interesting though that I mean, I'm sure that if it had been allowed to, if Brune hadn't have saved the day, that, you know, he would have tried to rape her. But the way things were, he was groping, and he was being very forthright. But I suppose you could argue that this is her first sexual encounter. And she seems to, afterwards, after she's been saved and she's able to just kind of like go to sleep, and she dreams about Joffrey dying and Robb dying, but she also then dreams about Tyrion being in her bed. And she also, but like bigger size, like not dwarf size. So she imagines Tyrion in her bed, and then he somehow in the dream sort of morphs into the Hound. And then she starts thinking about Lady and missing Lady, and thinking about the dog that's there that she's curled up to, wishing that it was Lady. There's all sorts of shit going on there with this dream. So it's kind of like potentially a bit of a, I wouldn't say a sexual dream, but following on from this heated sexual encounter that could potentially have been, you know, him trying to rape her if they hadn't have been stopped. But the fact that she has this dream about Tyrion being in a bed, and also later on when Lysa's like, oh, I know how terrible it is and how awful it is to be a woman, and these are the terrible things that have happened to me. And I'm not, you know, belittling that at all. I think Lysa had a terrible life.
Yeah.
But she kind of like, oh yeah, and then they made you marry the dwarf, they made you marry the imp, and like how horrendous that would have been. And she's trying to kind of, you know, gain some traction with Sansa by saying, I've suffered too, and this has happened to me, and blah 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 blah. But she also, when Sansa says, well, I'm still a maid, even though I'm a woman and I'm flowered, but I'm still a maid. And Lysa says, was the imp incapable? And Sansa thinks to herself, I can't say that nothing happened because he was too kind. So she does recognize Tyrion as being kind. She thinks about him. She has these weird dreams where he's in a bed with her, and it's like, I never ever in a million years thought until this particular reread, is there going to be in the future any scope at all for Tyrion and Sansa in a marriage? As a, you know, would it be like a friendship? Would there be an alliance?
I think she would do her duty, and it would end up becoming affectionate and loving. I would ship Tyrion and Sansa over the Hound and Sansa.
Yeah.
After this reread, I agree with you. I would totally, especially because I never really gave much to the way Tyrion thinks about her. Because in this time, a woman has to kind of do her duty. That's just the way it is, unfortunately. But Tyrion could very easily give her up, I guess. But I don't know if he will give her up that easily. Because, and I don't think it'll be just for Winterfell. Guys in the chat, and maybe in the comments later, who do you ship? Tyrion and Sansa, or Sansa and the Hound? And you can just say, oh, I don't ship either. But if you had to choose Sansa and Tyrion or Sansa and the Hound, I'd go Sansa Tyrion.
Yeah, me too.
At this stage, before Tyrion gets rapey. at this stage.
Yeah.
I'd go with Sansa and Tyrion. I do think that the thing with Lysa, where she tells Sansa that she's far too recognizable as Ark and a Tully, is bullshit. She's far too beautiful.
Yeah.
And she's trying to take away whatever she can from that beauty, including the auburn hair. I know I'm biased.
And the resemblance to Cat, who was like an amazing beauty. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's possible that Sansa is one of the most beautiful women in the kingdom until Arya comes back. It's possible, like, the Stark kids are going to be strikingly beautiful. Especially when if Marjorie isn't around. Like, if the highborn ladies in the kingdom, they're going to be sought after. And that, I know this is going to sound terrible, but that might save them. That might save them.
Yeah.
Because that's the way of this world, unfortunately. Jules ships Sansan. No, what's Tyrion and Sansa? Sanon? No, that sounds terrible. Taisha kind of sounds the same. So yeah, just very creepy, and it's no wonder if she's having slightly sexual dreams after hearing her aunt go at it.
That could be related to that. But there's this thing again at the end of the chapter about Sansa's claim, and she thinks, will I ever marry for love, or is it just people wanting to secure their claim in the north? Because here in this chapter, Lysa talks about, and I'd kind of forgotten this in a way. I remembered it when I read it, but I'd forgotten that almost immediately Lysa was like, how would you like to marry your cousin, sweet Robin? And it's like, well, hang on a minute, Tyrion's still alive. And she's like, yeah, well, that won't last forever. You know, it's after he dies, how would you like to marry your cousin? And Sansa thinks, oh my God, will anyone ever marry me for love? And it's
by the way, that would be the worst marriage of the three, Tyrion, Hound, and Sweet Robin. That would be the worst. Everybody's going for the Hound. Jules going for the Hound. Barbara and Sonny. Barbara says, I vote Sansa and the Hound. The Hound would give her safety and protection she needs. Yeah, I guess. I think Tyrion would do a good job of that as well, although he hasn't done a great job with Shay.
So Lysa at the end of this chapter very clearly put Sansa in her place as, oh, you're a beggar now. You're no more than a beggar, really. You're just a bastard child. You were highborn, but Winterfell doesn't exist anymore. So what you need to do is make sure that you are thankful for the position that you're in and obedient to Peter, trust in him, listen to everything that he says. So this is going to be difficult for Sansa, as much as she's been through already. This is like the biggest challenge so far, I think, because she's really having to think on her feet and figure out, well, how can I manipulate the situation to my advantage?
But Claire, I think you're not giving enough credit to the pain and suffering of Peter Baelish, who has to sleep with Lysa Tully.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of hardship there as well, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty obvious that Lysa can't live. Like, even reading this back, I was like, there's no way he could keep her alive. She's way too dogmatic and just stubborn and not willing to give an inch on anything. And it's obvious that she's going to have problems with Sansa. And her jealousy will be too much. But interesting the way, I think you already mentioned this as well, the way Sansa instantly kind of has this very visceral reaction to playing a bastard and kind of asks Littlefinger, can't you say that I married your mother? And it's very Cat. But she will move away from that, I guess, as well.
Interesting that Lysa talks about how she had 5 miscarriages and Cat had 5 children. So it's like the two, they're so different from each other, which just makes me think, I mean, you can get that with sisters. You can get sisters that are completely different from each other. But I think something happened to Lysa where she was damaged beyond repair almost. And I still think that this has something to do with Hoster, that there was some kind of exploitation or abuse there.
I think there was some abuse.
Because,
and I think, and I know this is like, it's a terrible thing to say, but often very kind of intellectually vulnerable people are also vulnerable to abuse. And seems like it's like Lysa could be that type of person.
Yeah.
I mean, even the way she talks about the son, and Sansa's going to play games with him, but you always have to let him win now. And I think that's only fair because he's the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It just has no sense at all. Very, very stunted growth intellectually, Lysa. I mean, poor John Arryn.
Yeah.
He must have had one intelligent conversation with the woman. But poor her as well, clearly. Although Barbara was so glad she got pushed through the moon door later. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to feel too much sympathy for her, but yeah, I don't know. I think we will find out more about Lysa.
Yeah.
It will not be good. And yeah, I think Edmure might know more than he's letting on. I have a feeling one of the reasons why Edmure got away with not marrying is because he knew something. He probably knew something about that, and Hoster knew he knew.
Do you mean the Blackfish or Edmure?
Edmure.
Right. Okay.
I've been thinking, because I remember I've been asking you, like all through the cat chapters, how does Edmure get to this stage without having to get married?
Yeah.
And there's no even conversation of him being pushed on anyone.
Yeah.
It's so out of like character for Hoster not to have alliances with all of his kids set up. And I think maybe Edmure saw something.
Even just to prevent shit like this happening in the future.
Yeah. I think Edmure saw something, and maybe he didn't fully understand it, but maybe Hoster believed him to understand it, or maybe he suggested that he knew something and Hoster never pushed it with him. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but there has to be an explanation for why Edmure isn't forced upon anyone. Hoster is too clever to have not had his line secure as he shuffled off the mortal coil. Why would he secure both his daughters, who have no inheritance rights to Riverrun, and not secure Edmure's line? It doesn't make any sense. And Barbara says maybe the Blackfish suffered abuse from Hoster as well. Well, you said that you think the Blackfish knew about Lysa. Yeah. I definitely think we haven't seen it. We haven't seen it yet. And George was raised a Catholic, and we all know the scandals that have hit that church, that institution. So it's not, I don't think it's out of the realms of possibility that we're going to have a serious case of child abuse, because we really haven't seen it. It's one thing, like we have references to it. And of course, the children, like they're all children and very young. And we've had some references to it around Arya and things like that. But in terms of a major character, I think it's funny because I've been kind of binge watching Poldark and The Last Kingdom, but Poldark especially, and it kind of comes up in Poldark even. I'm like, it needs to come up at some stage, I'm guessing. It's a very dark underbelly of human behavior. So maybe, or unless he doesn't want to talk about it or doesn't want to really address it in great issue. But I think there's definitely something there with Lysa and Hoster. I totally, you have so
and the lasting damage that something like that causes throughout the generations. I think it's just a really, you could look at their house sigil, family duty honor, as something really twisted and fucked up. Really.
So that's it for Sansa, unless you have anything else to say.
No, I don't think so. No.
I kind of forgot that we had visited Peter Baelish's house as well. I forgot all about that. it does give you some great insight. And actually, speaking of Poldark, he's very kind of, that side of him is similar to the antagonist from Poldark. Do you watch Poldark?
No, but I know the actor. Well, I don't know him personally, but the actor who's Aidan.
You personally, I'd be straight over.
I used to watch him. Do you ever remember Being Human? It was on a few years ago, and it was he played like a vampire in that, and it was a vampire, a ghost, and a werewolf sharing a house together, sharing a flat together. It was actually quite good. Oh, it's like a British thing.
The antagonist in it, basically, there's a lot of Littlefinger qualities to him, and that idea that his family kind of came from trade, so they kind of bought their way into society, and he never quite fully feels totally accepted. But it's different with Littlefinger in the sense that he abandons all his family's traits to take on like the Mockingbird and all that kind of thing. So he's a complicated character.
Yeah, he's I mean, in this chapter we acknowledge his origins, but I think we can also acknowledge that he's trying to somehow recreate his own origins.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, so then we're into John 9, another exhausting start for John chapters. This is 3 in a row. And at 3 in a row, I think, where he's dreaming or talking about sleep as well. So he says at the beginning of this chapter, he closed his eyes and dreamed of fighting. And when he woke, he fought. And it's like, it's just a never-ending cycle. That could be just on John's tombstone. That's all he does, is fight or prepare to fight.
Yeah.
So again, the more I read John chapter and this reread, the more I think the guy just kind of like, I'm kind of glad for him that he died, because this is exhausting. His life is exhausting.
There's loads of setup for betrayals in this chapter later on. So I didn't write many notes really for this chapter. I just summed it up as 2. There's a turtle attacking from the north, and there's a turd that's come up from the south, or a turtle. But yeah, so you've got you've got it on both fronts attacking the wall.
I should have looked this up. Is the turtle an actual thing from history, or is that a nod to Stephen King?
Is it, the turtles, like the wagons that are turned over that were like ramming the wall? Is a turtle a thing, like in warfare? Yes, it is, apparently.
And it's called a turtle. Okay.
And it's called a turtle. Yeah.
Okay. Just they eventually destroy it by dropping frozen balls.
But what they did was they got rocks in the barrels and put water in, which froze overnight. So you basically got a boulder of ice and rocks thrown from 700 feet that just smashed the turtle to pieces.
Which, if, like we have long suspected, and I think many people it feels like it's fan canon at this stage, that the wall is a physical representation, an embodiment of the pact that seems to have been formed centuries ago between men, children, and White Walkers potentially. And maybe giants, maybe a number of groups come together. This is a good way of showing what men can bring to that, because so far there hasn't been much that they can bring to it. But this is one way in which it's kind of the men working with the wall to defend itself. So that was you have to look for it, though. You really have to look for what men are actually bringing to it, unless it's some sort of like the blood that the men spill at the wall in defending it is some sort of blood sacrifice, blood magic type thing that's built into it. Other than that, the wall seems to be capable of defending itself in so many ways. Yeah. That if it didn't have doors, it'd probably be better off.
Yeah.
But the doors are there to let the men in and out.
Yeah. But, so the presence of men has ruined that pact.
Yeah. So this is where Thorin and Slint show up, and They accuse John of oath breaking and treason. Slint loves that, doesn't he? He loves being able to do this. And he just wants to make the bastard of Ned Stark suffer a bit more. And yeah, I don't really have much here either, actually. I will say, is this necessarily a bad idea on behalf of the Night's Watch from Eastwatch? Because they don't really know where Jon's loyalties lie. Completely bad execution. But in fairness, they have been, well, with the exception of Slint, I guess, they have been on the wall for years to believing that the wildlings are the threat. The wildlings are the threat. They haven't seen the other threat that Jon has seen, the bigger threat. So it's hard for them to fathom why Jon would ever kill a brother and go over to the wildlings to try and get information. And they can't believe Aemon on this. So I think.
And where's the Lord Commander and what, the mutiny and
So in fairness to them, I mean, they have other intentions entirely. Well, Slint does for sure, but they have other intentions. But in theory, it may not be a bad thing.
Yeah.
To put Jon in the cells.
Just to question him about this oath breaking thing, because he admits to it. He says, "Look, I broke my vows with Ygritte." The key thing that he's trying to get them to understand is it was under orders. So I wasn't everything that it's almost kind of like you got to give me a break here, because what I was doing was under orders. So therefore, I never broke my vows. I was put in this situation where I was told by a commanding officer, do this thing, including kill me. It sounds ridiculous, and it's going to sound ridiculous to them. And, they're going to need to question him on it. But
so
it's just who comes to his aid here. Septon Celador is a complete turd and drops Jon right in it by saying, oh, you just to throw this in the mix. When we're talking about vows and breaking vows, this guy did his vows not in the Septon, not in the, but actually in this weird old religion in front of this tree, just putting it out there. And it's like, what a shit! What why did you even have to mention that? And then of course you've got Maester Aemon who comes to his defense, and only Maester Aemon really who comes to his defense and says, look, let's just clarify this a little bit, But he doesn't. I mean, what he says is, the old bear had a lot of faith in Jon, could see promise in Jon, therefore so do I. Which probably kind of sounds like a weak.
It is weak, because we have to remember that at the wall, there are very few high-born voices and high-born representatives. Mormont, Jon, and Aemon. There might be a couple of others, but for the most part, and Slint was just knocking on the door, giving his sons a high-born legacy. But for the most part, the Night's Watch offers them a second chance at glory and at respect, and for Jon's only defense to come from the dead Lord Commander, Donal Noy, and Aemon. It's kind of like talking to the French revolutionaries. Sorry, I've watched too much Blue Dark this week, but it is kind of like you're trying to negotiate with people who all they have is one another's backs. It's like the soldiers are talking to the dirty generals. Like, why would we believe you? There's no way we're going to believe you. We're going to believe each other. The officers are revolting, and how do we know? I mean, there is, I think it's the Order of the Green Hand. I think we talked about it with Half Hand, that he is a high tower. Is that right? Or went?
I'm not sure.
Oh, maybe we didn't. So the Order of the Green Hand had this theory that Corran Half Hand, and who was the guy that stayed behind so Corran and Jon could get away?
Oh God.
God, I can't remember who it was now. Anyway, that's Wenton Hightower.
Right. Okay.
I think that's their theory.
Right.
But it is an incredibly difficult situation that they put Jon in. They basically, with no witnesses at all, say you have to be able to convince everybody who only know you, a wet year. They don't know you that long at all.
Yeah.
You have to convince them to not believe the people they've known for years and to believe you.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes sense if you buy into the fact that they are the trio from the Tower of Joy, because that's the life they've been living, where they've known something that nobody else has witnessed to, maybe Ned and Howland Reed potentially, but that they've kind of bought into that. So they've forgotten how a group or mob mentality works, because this is very much a mob mentality. And of course these guys they didn't see what Jon did when the Wildings first attacked in the last chapter.
Yeah.
They didn't see what happened with the giant and all that kind of thing. So but again, I mean, it's bad execution, but maybe not the worst idea to put him in the cell. I mean, if it was anyone else, if Jon did it to somebody else, we'd go, oh yeah, of course, no problem. Barbara asks, anyone think Aemon's at the wall for secret reasons, not because he didn't want to make trouble for his brother, the king? It's possible. It's possible that he's there because of Brendan.
Yeah.
No.
There's a link to the Three-Eyed Raven. Yeah.
Yeah. Possible. It seems unlikely that he would. Yeah, I don't know, Barbara. I'd have to think about it a little bit more. I definitely think Mormont and Benjen are there for secret reasons, for sure. Yeah. So yeah, I don't really have much either here, to be honest. Jon gets thrown in the cell. That's what I have.
Yeah. Well, Rattleshirt's been,
of course,
has been captured.
Interesting that they take his word over Aemon's as well.
Yeah.
Well, he can only give them what he knows.
Yeah.
For a fact. But yeah. So then we move on to Tyrion 10, which is epic.
Yeah.
And so we have Tyrion, because we go from the wall to Tyrion in a cell, thinking maybe life at the wall wouldn't be that bad. I could go use a brothel, a nearby brothel if I needed to. And I think this is ironic because after Shay's testimony, Tyrion is going to have a very conflicted relationship with his sexual habits after Shay's testimony and everything. He's going to his sex drive is going to be seriously altered. So it's funny that here he's thinking about, I go to Night's Watch, can I still get me whole? I don't know. So that's all he cares about. And even because he's masturbated a bit as well in the cells. He's I think in both of these chapters. But yeah, so I guess the big kind of thing at the beginning of this is Shay's testimony, right?
Yeah.
And she's far less sympathetic than the show version. Because in the show version, they have her make this meaningful eye contact with him, but we don't get any hint of that here.
No.
It's really, really horrible and complete act. And I was going to marry a little lordling and blah, blah, blah. Or a blacksmith or whatever it was.
Yeah, squire. Yeah.
Yeah.
First thing I want to ask you, sorry, I'm just finishing one coat of my nails here.
I was thinking, what are you putting on?
It's the one of the nice ones from that awful Paradise collection, China Glaze Paradise collection. But it looks orange there, but it's like a bright strawberry red.
Oh,
it's
really?
It's called Kiki in our Tiki. That's what it's called.
You don't usually wear red.
I know. I've decided to go a bit summery this week. So. with it being the solstice and all that.
Yeah.
But what I was going to ask is, before we get to the trial and Shay and the battle, is do you think that Pod will ever see Tyrion again? Because he remains loyal to him, doesn't he, when he goes off with Brienne?
Yeah.
And he kind of talks about... I get the impression that he's still somehow loyal to Tyrion, and it just makes me wonder whether or not they'll ever meet each other again.
I think he will. Do you think Ilan Payne is still alive in the books, isn't he?
Yes.
Do you think Pod would have to kill him? Maybe.
Yeah.
Because they're related, so that would be interesting.
It would.
I wonder, would he choose to save Tyrion or Brienne over saving Ilan Payne? I think the only reason they took him out of the show is because the actor was suddenly diagnosed with terminal cancer.
Yeah.
And they had to take him out.
And then Bran ended up taking the place with the sword fighting. But that question's been asked a lot. My blood or my king? Who do I, in this situation? It's asked a lot.
It would be awful to see poor little Pod in that situation. But yeah. Sonny says, this time when Tywin humiliates Tyrion with Shay's testimony, it backfires on Tywin.
Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time. Tywin definitely wasn't expecting this. Somebody else had a video made about this, and I watched it ages ago. It could have been the Order of the Green Hand. It could have been somebody else, about Tywin and his reaction here and how important it is to Tywin's overall scheme at this point in time. That he was trying to avoid a trial by combat at any stage, not only because of Tyrion, but to also not give the Martells and Oberyn the satisfaction of getting any sort of revenge.
So do you think that this isn't about... Do you think Tywin is clearly angry, but is he angry about Tyrion not confessing and then him being able to just shove him off to the wall? Or is he angry because... Is he more angry that there's going to be a battle?
I think Tywin is like any kind of highborn, upper class despot. I think he's angry that people have free will and that he can't control the outcome. And I think he had a very set in mind. He's like, okay, we're going to pin this on Tyrion because I need to get Tyrion out of here. He's wrecking my head. And he's going to be an embarrassment. And if the shit hits the fan, I don't want Tyrion around. So I'm going to send him to the wall, put him up the wall, because I'd also kind of like his eyes and ears at the wall, because he's smart and I could do with him up there. And Slint is a pain in the arse, and I know he's not going to be trusted. So we need somebody we can trust in that far north. Or maybe he just wants to get rid of Tyrion. But I don't know. But not kill him. I think that's the big thing. I don't think he wanted to kill Tyrion. And not give Martell. The big thing I think for Tywin is not allowing Oberyn Martell to get the satisfaction or to bring that all up again, what Gregor Clegane did. Because I don't think, because Tywin even said it to Tyrion, and I believed him when he said it to Tyrion, that he never... He told Gregor to take the kids and Elia, but he never told them not to kill them. He was surprised at what they did, what Lorch and what Amory and Gregor did to them. He didn't expect that. He was shocked by that. So, but at the same time, bringing that up undermines Lannister power, and keep reminding the public in such kind of, especially because King's Landing it's really precarious at the moment. It's full of people. Like Jaime even talks about it. They didn't give a shit that Joff was dead. I mean, if they think they can put sweet innocent Tommen in charge, and he's 8. Tywin knows that the people are not going to accept an 8-year-old king when they're going to starve and the winter is coming. So I think he was doing everything to try and make a spectacle and just kind of sweep this away without being without kind of riling up people. I mean, it's kind of like the Romans when they used to have the fighting pits and gladiators and all that kind of thing. It was a way of entertaining the masses. But that kind of level of violence also kind of encourages violence sometimes, especially when it's spontaneous and not planned for. And in this case, it's spontaneous and not planned for. So, like, you get the feeling even at the trial by combat that the crowd are they're inching their way forward all the time, and it's like they're constantly getting too close. And Tywin is probably very aware of the fact that King's Landing is a bit of a powder keg, and it wouldn't take much for rebellion to start, especially with rumors about Cersei and Jaime going around. So,
well, just a quick point, talking about the masses. 1,000 people.
I didn't see that.
According to Tyrion, roughly 1,000 people came to see the fight. And it just made me think at this point, there must be a reason for this every now and again. It literally is coming up in like every third chapter, the number 1,000. And I think it's used as a reference for this is somewhere that Bloodraven has got access to, or he's able to see. This is, so when Tyrion says 1,000 people came to see the fight, what that means is Bloodraven can see the fight. Or when a couple of chapters previous to that, when Jaime talks about the White Book being about 1,000 pages, to me that means Bloodraven has had that book in his hands at some point, or he's been able to read what's been written in it. Basically, when the number 1,000 comes up, I think that is a reference to Bloodraven was here. That's it. Yeah.
Because Bloodraven references 1,000.
1,000 eyes and one.
Yes. Yeah. And even Tyrion thinks they should have just had it in the dragon pit, because they probably would have got more than 1,000 people. I mean, imagine, like, anyone would go see that. That's like 3 Conor McGregors fighting one another. the Mountain and the Viper.
That would have been epic.
Yeah. It's so epic. And we are told that Tywin looks like he's been poisoned at the trial. I mentioned that. As soon as the trial by combat is, he refers to his sweet sister being like ecstatic about the prospect of Tyrion facing trial by combat. She's just dying to let her monster loose. So Oberyn is, well, I mean, I don't think we need to talk about Tyrion's speech. It's almost verbatim in the show, and Peter Dinklage does an amazing job of it. He is on trial for being a dwarf. He is a scapegoat. There's no doubt about it. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Even later, when Oberyn is talking to him, he's telling him the story about when Oberyn and Elia were younger and they went to Casterly Rock, and Oberyn's mother and Tyrion's mother were friends, and they were trying to arrange a marriage pact. Now, I know you mentioned this before, that there's kind of a theory out there that Oberyn and Elia were lovers in the same way that Jaime and Cersei were. And potentially, if that is true, or even if it's not, but Joanna may have spoken to Oberyn's mother about it as a friend, out of concern, confided in what's going on, and maybe they concocted this plan to bring the two together. And kind of cut out the what's going on with Cersei and Jaime, or Oberyn and Ellie on her side, but that Tywin refused to give Cersei because he kind of had her earmarked for Rhaegar, or Jaime, and offered baby Tyrion instead for Elia, which there must be 9 years between them, probably much more. And that the fact that Elia offered that Elia was offered Tyrion and refused was a slight for Tywin. And then later when Elia was given to Rhaegar, that's another slight. So Oberyn thinks that this is why Tywin had Elia killed so brutally.
Because of the slight against it. Just as you're talking then, I'm thinking I'm trying to make, well, first of all, I'm trying to make sense of my notes. That I've got something here about the butterfly effect, but I don't know why. Something to do with a fart. Did somebody fart or something in this chapter?
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah.
A what?
Baelor Breakwind.
Baelor Breakwind.
Yeah. So Elia was going to be married to him, but he farts, and she decides I can't marry him. He's disgusting. And because of that, she ends up marrying Rhaegar.
Okay.
And so obviously then Rhaegar and Lyanna and blah blah blah, and that's the birth.
So the question was, if that fart hadn't have happened, history could have been completely different. So that's why
he had more fiber in his diet.
Yeah. So that's why in my notes I've got butterfly effect and sliding doors and Cersei and Jaime. But I'm just thinking about Tywin's anger and his control freakery. He was immediately angry at Tyrion asking for a trial by battle, because he also says, let the gods decide. And I think that might be what Tywin's angry at. No, God's deciding. I decide what happens. So just the fact that at some point in his life, in his existence, there's something that he can't control, which is, oh, well, we just need to let the gods decide this. That could be what he was angry at. But I do think that there's something here about this trio of women, Rhaella, Joanna, and Oberyn, and Illyria's mother, whose name I can't remember, but their mother. They were all friends, but also it was there was this rumor that Joanna ruled Tywin at home, like behind closed doors. So this potentially, I think, was a plot by those three women. So
this is where I get a little bit fudged on the timeline, and it's probably because I didn't really think about it properly as I was reading. So Elia and Oberyn, they are offered to Tywin before they get to Castle Rock.
Yeah.
And they're refused.
Yeah.
Then Joanna dies, and they go to visit and they're offered Tyrion instead. Or no, they go to try and get Jaime for Elia, and then they're offered Tyrion instead.
Yeah.
So when Cersei is refused, then they travel to Castle Rock, but it's too late because Joanna's dead.
Yeah.
Wait, okay. It makes me think that Joanna isn't dead. That if she is dead, that she was killed. That Tywin had decided, right, that's enough. I don't want you controlling me anymore. Especially now that you have given birth to a son that's going to be refused by everybody. Jules says Tywin thought he could keep things in order by controlling everyone and everyone he could, everything and everyone he could, even though means of shady, underhanded deal, or even through, I can't read, even through means of shady, underhanded deals or alliances. There's definitely something not quite right about. I mean, that would be a massive thing for Tywin if Joanna decides she's going to undermine him politically and try and take Cersei and marry her to a Dornish man, especially when we hear about, like, Tyrion has such horrible jokes about Dornish people. Like, he's quite racist towards Dornish people. That's clearly coming from Tywin, because if Joanna was friends with the Martells, it's clearly like that. It was a Tywin thing. Like, I know a lot of people are racist towards Dornish people in general in Westeros, but to go and marry off your child into a a part of the realm that everybody else kind of sees as below them, even more so than Northerners. It seems a bit. It would explain why Tywin would take that as a severe slight, for sure. Yeah.
A couple of interesting comments from Sunny. If Tywin kills Joff, why wouldn't he kill Tyrion? That's an interesting one. And also, if Joanna is still alive, that might be why Tywin never remarries. Yeah, could be.
That's true. Yeah.
I think the reason that Tywin wouldn't kill Tyrion is because he knows that Tyrion is his true-born son. That's my theory, anyway.
Yeah, I think so.
And I think that he knows that. I think deep down he knows that Joff is a bastard.
I think there's also an argument to be made that he knows that Cersei and Jaime are not.
Yeah.
I lean very far. I lean very far towards they are Targaryen.
Yeah.
That potentially, I think maybe 70% the way there. Yeah, definitely.
So there's a lot of, if not foreshadowing, then at least some reference to how story arcs are going to be developed in the future. When Tyrion is singing "Hands of Gold are always cold," so he's singing that song to himself in the cell before he eats this huge breakfast before the battle. That obviously, that comes up again in the not too distant future. And also when Tyrion says we are puppets dancing on the strings of those that went before us. So again, it's that, sins of the father and things coming back, history coming back to repeat itself. There are a couple of things that I wanted to bring up about the fight. I mean, not only was it just physically, maybe not wits and experience, but physically and just weaponry and battle armor woefully mismatched. But also there's this I think we know why. Who? But this thing about Gregor, about the mountain, having these blinding headaches. I think this has come up before in the story, but certainly here in this chapter, you can see with all the noise from the crowd and the sound of the, the steel on steel, and it's ringing in his head under his helm, and he's shouting, shut up, be quiet. And you can tell that it's because he's suffering from this horrendous cluster headache or whatever it is that's going on under his helm. So there's that to be mindful of, I think. But also when he screams that I killed her whelp, not whelps, it's just one.
Yeah, Lorch killed the other one.
Oh, really? Right, okay. That just made me think, right, okay, that's an admission that...
No, Tywin, because that was the thing, because Tywin can kind of understand why the mountain did it. He cannot... He says to Tyrion, I just couldn't understand why Lorch killed her like that.
Right, okay.
He stabbed the little one, Rhaenys, 50 times.
Right.
And Tywin couldn't understand that. That was the one that I think he felt the worst about, actually. And when Tyrion says to Oberyn, Lorch killed the kid, he killed the daughter. So yeah, no, he definitely didn't kill the daughter. Sure. But what do you think causes the headache?
I mean, it could be a genetic thing, given his massive size. I mean, just the way he's described as almost 8 feet tall and 30 stone of sheer muscle, which is
be a tumor of some sort that's kind of on a gland somewhere.
Yeah, could be. But I mean, I'm guessing that this is something to do with his personality and his behavior as well, is because he's in constant agony all the time.
There's a story that Joe Rogan constantly talks about. Sam Kinison, the comedian, that I think he died of an overdose or heart attack or something. But his brother wrote a biography. He was a really angry comedian, like always like going crazy on stage, but he had real bad addiction and stuff. But his brother said that when he had a really bad car accident, I think in his late teens, early 20s, his personality changed overnight.
Right.
Like overnight, his personality, he became more aggressive, kind of more addictive personality, louder, took risks more, all that kind of thing. And it makes me wonder, did something happen to Gregor maybe that made him kind of become the monster?
A trauma.
Some sort of trauma. Because, you know, he inflicts a lot of trauma himself. But he has literally been through the wars. Like we know that he was he was injured quite a bit by Ross forces.
Yeah.
So I mean, it could be that as well. But I kind, when you said that they're mismatched, they are. But I also think Oberyn definitely had him.
Yeah.
I don't think Gregor was going to win, and it's kind of, vengeance is a double-edged sword here for Oberyn, because it keeps him going to the point where he isn't going to let up, and he could have taken him. But also, he's so set on getting vengeance on his own terms. He needs to hear from Gregor that he doesn't take him out when he gets the chance. He could have just taken him out, and he doesn't, and that's the pity. It's pretty. It's the best fight scene. It's definitely the best fight scene on the show.
Yeah.
I think for me, that's number one. Number two is probably Jon fighting the White Walker. I love that scene.
Yeah.
But no, I think, it's Tyrion's despair, and the fact that like he's eating Dornish peppers as well, and he vomits up the Dornish peppers. I mean, I mean, the imagery is great. Especially when we get into Dany's chapter as well. It's something that George is just brilliant on.
Yeah.
You know, and if anyone hasn't seen the interview with Stephen King and George R.R. Martin, where they talk about writing, and Stephen King has this thing because he produces so much, but he has to get 6 pages done every day. And George says he struggles to get a paragraph done some days. Like it's really difficult for him. But I think you can see it sometimes in the quality of Stephen King's work. Compared to the quality of George R.R. Martin's work. Definitely. And I really like Stephen King as well. I'm not saying that, but you see sometimes certain pieces are crafted so much, and so that's really all I have, I think. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, me too. No, it's just like, you know, at the end of that chapter, Tyrion is dragged off to the black cells. In Jon's chapter, he's dragged off to the ice cells. So there's a lot of imprisonment.
Ion had a great theory. I'm not sure if I mentioned it last week, but Ion has a great theory that Joanna's soul lives in a wild weirwood cave underneath the rock, because it's mentioned in the world of Ice and Fire. I believe he said this to me last week, that and when Jaime falls asleep with his head on the weirwood stump and the image of Joanna comes to him, that's because she's kind of in the weirwood network now. I think it's a really good, theory. The one thing I did want to mention, there is a scene here where Tyrion is kind of talking to Tywin's shadow in his cell, and kind of, you know, laughing at him and kind of berating him before the trial by combat. And it's just like, it's so symbolic of how Tyrion lives his life with shadow constantly. And killing him won't change that. And it's interesting because with Jaime, it's more like the shadow of Arthur Dane rather than the shadow of Tywin. You don't really get that sense of Jaime. That's the shadow of Tywin. And maybe the shadow of Aerys, ironically. Follows Jaime around, of course. So then we're on to the last Dany chapter. And we've only had 6 chapters from Dany, which I was surprised at, actually. A lot has happened. A lot has happened and a lot hasn't happened. As I was saying before, I guess we have George has to find a way. Dany is the tricky one because he has to give the dragons time to grow up. So we won't see the dragons for a while, although there is an interesting piece of foreshadowing towards the end of the chapter where she sees Viserion flying in the distance, and comments almost directly after it saying, one day one of her dragons will leave her and never come back. And just now, based on what's happened in the show, it's Viserion that seems to be. Interestingly enough, and it's ominous. Come when we get to dance, especially ominous because Dany compares herself to a god at the beginning of this chapter, and then we have a lot of stuff about Targaryens and madness. So it's not the most and then she sees herself as an avenging dragon as well. So she's very conflicted as to what to do in this chapter, and she finally decides in the end what she should do. But so what do you think of Dany the Queen in this chapter?
I think, well, I agree. There's a lot of doubt. So I thought this chapter was when we see Quaithe. So I was really surprised. It was like, oh yeah, here she is. She's going out onto the terrace and she's talking about the fruit and the persimmon and pomegranates. And the next thing we're going to see Quaithe giving her this prophecy, but it's not in this chapter, which surprised me. I think that, it's interesting that we get this, and I saw your quote underlined on Instagram about the two sides of the coin with the Targaryens. And I think she probably does think, which one, who am I, which one am I? But also it seems that you don't have to be necessarily born that way. It makes it seem as though you're born one way or the other. You're going to either be a good king or you're going to be completely insane. It's, you flip a coin. But interestingly, Barristan the Bold, when he's saying, I see no taint in you, and he talks about the Mad King, he talks about how Aerys was actually quite a good king and fair and just and, like good King Jaehaerys kind of thing. But then he progressively became more crazy, which again means something happened to Aerys. And I don't think it was just mounting paranoia. I mean, you can imagine somebody going crazy if that was the case. If you've got Tywin as your hand, who's really ruling the realm, and then you've got people like Varys running around spinning tales and all kinds of things, you probably would be extremely crazy. But I do like the theory that this is like a time-traveling Bran or Bloodraven, whispering in his ear, and the whole, burn them all is I don't necessarily think that at the time that he said that he actually meant burn King's Landing. I think he probably just meant get these voices out of my head or something, something like that. But so you can be, the gods toss a coin and it lands on you're a Targaryen and you're a good Targaryen, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be like that for you for the rest of your life.
No, and the quote actually doesn't say what happens when the coin lands. It just says people hold their breath.
Yes.
The kingdom holds their breath. And I could literally do 2 hours on this chapter. I love this chapter. But the first, like you mentioned the persimmon fruit, that whole, like the first couple of paragraphs, there's allusions to Paradise Lost and the creation story, because we have an idea in the West that it's an apple, that the Eve with the apple. Actually, it's probably more like a persimmon. So there's a lot of allusions to her with Eve, and throughout this chapter, the idea of free will is really important, and that madness is really it's really like the kingdom looking in. It's not necessarily a good representation of the actual person, what you see somebody do, you go, oh, that's mad. Why would you do that? But it's not, doesn't actually mean they're mad, but it's how they're perceived. And Dany is grappling with that. She's like, how is this going to look? The city is full of flies. I've just crucified all the masters. I've created all these widows. I'm no better than them. And she kind of has this kind of retribution versus revenge type thing going on. And she talks about how, what is the line she says? Harsh justice is still
justice. Yeah.
Which is something Ned would say, right?
Yeah.
I feel like that's a very Ned thing. And everybody loves Ned, but remember, the first time we see Ned, he takes a guy's head off. So
it's also quite a Stannis thing to say as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's not a very Robert thing to say. I guess he did order Lady to be killed. But yeah, and Ian, sorry, just continuing on from the Joanna is in the Weirwood kind of network underneath Castle Rock. That's why she was able to reach Jaime when he was asleep on the Weirwood stump. There might be something to that for sure, yeah. So a lot to do with freedom, free will. She also talks about freedom, and she can't understand why the slaves want to sell themselves back to the masters. She can't understand why she doesn't just abolish the system straight away. I mean, even after the American Civil War, slavery ended, but the slaves didn't necessarily leave where they were working. They had
the way I looked at this was, and I've talked to you about this all the time, but moving from being self-employed to employed, I'm a job slave now. I am.
Welcome
like
to the club.
The rest, like the majority of the human race, but and I feel it. I do feel that I'm now obliged to a specific organization, and basically I've got a job and I can pay my bed and board, and what the Karth trader was saying was like, these are kind of professional jobs, like teachers, educators, artists, and bed warmers again, maybe, but this is actually quite a nice existence. Why wouldn't the slaves be like lined up on the banks waiting to go back to, or waiting to be taken to Astapor?
I think her image of slavery is the same as like most of us, that it's somebody who's being bound against their free will, flogged to death on a daily basis. And I think in this part of the world, slavery covers everything. But like Jorah tried to make the point before, or somebody else tried to make the point before to Dany, that slavery is kind of just the label they use. Like slavery exists everywhere. It exists in Westeros as well. It's just not called slavery. I mean, the system that's in Westeros is a system of slavery, if you want to look at it like that.
I just think employment is, if you're working for another company, you don't necessarily have free will. You're bound by their rules and regulations and code of practice and all of that kind of thing, and if you don't jump through those hoops, you lose your job, and then maybe you can't pay for your bed and board and all that kind of, I don't understand why she can't rationalize it. But again, she's basically, at the same time, by giving them that choice and knowing that the Butcher King in Yunkai is already making new Unsullied for the future, isn't she colluding again with the slave trade by saying yes, give them that choice?
You don't even have to look that far. I mean, she admits it in this chapter that her lovemaking with Eerie is like, the kisses feel like, or the kisses
duty,
taste like duty. Yeah, it's like that. That's a form of slavery.
Yes.
I mean, it comes back to that notion of free will. if your only choice is not to die, that isn't really much of a choice. Like, what would Eerie do if she didn't have that job? What are the slaves going to do without work? And this isn't like a defense of slavery at all.
Yeah.
You can't just go in and say, right, that's it, done, my way or no way.
Yeah,
without offering an alternative.
Yeah.
She hasn't offered an alternative.
No, there isn't an alternative. So
and
people
everybody
go,
suffers.
And on an individual basis, I can't blame those slaves for lining up the banks and saying, please get me a decent job somewhere where I actually have a reasonable life and I can pay for things and I have a certain amount of free will.
Or I don't know. I knew that system. I don't know this system. What is this system? What are we doing here? Give me something to work with. And this is unfortunately where it's bad timing, the whole Jorah thing. Because the one person who could actually offer her insight into this system is the one person now that she has to banish. And she has to banish him. But also she's looking at it in a very emotional way.
Yeah, she at any point she could run after him, and she's kind of saying to herself, farewell, old bear. And but he is very, like, the way they react is very different. Barristan, she can see the value in Barristan immediately because he's offering her loyalty and he is explaining why he's going to be loyal, but also he's this resource library of tapping into her family and Targaryen history, and she can see how useful Barristan is going to be in the future. With Jorah, he is just pushing it far too much. He's just very insolent. He's very, you have to forgive me for this. You must forgive me.
He's
and
like
it's like, it just,
boy,
yeah.
It's really, it's, he's not behaving like a Kingsguard, that's for sure.
He also admits that he was betraying her right up until Karth. So all the way through that journey through the Red Waste and him saying, let's run away to wherever and blah, 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 he was still sending reports back to Varys at the time, although he does say that Varys never wanted you harmed, he just wanted you watched.
That's right, yeah.
But she ends up banishing him anyway.
So Robert could only have sent words through Varys that he wanted her killed, right? Robert didn't have any other way of sending word. So does that mean that potentially the assassin that she met in the market wasn't from Varys and wasn't from Robert, that's somebody else? Maybe,
yeah.
Because if Varys only wanted her watched, that suggests that he didn't give that message.
Or it could have been just messages getting crossed.
Maybe.
It could have just been a timing thing.
Or Robert had somebody else watching her. Yeah, or it's Illyria, maybe Illyrio. So the other thing that we see here is the swearing in of Barristan, and it says that he says the words. Again, no oath.
Yeah.
And it's really frustrating. That's all I wanted to point out. We don't get the Kingsguard oath, and it's very frustrating. Interestingly, I know I've brought this up before, I think on Clash, maybe Game of Thrones as well. Game of Thrones for sure. For one of the very few times, I bet if we went through all Dany's chapters, you would only you count on one hand how many times Dany thinks of her mother, and she thinks of her twice in this chapter. And it's only part of a list. Dany is obsessed with thinking about Rhaegar, Aerys, and Viserys in that order, I would say. Her mother rarely ever factors into it, which is very different to other people who've lost their mother. Tyrion thinks about his mother more. Jon thinks about his mother more. Dany doesn't think about her mother, and I think that's very odd. There's something not right about that.
Do you think Rhaella could still be around as well? I mean, I've got this notion of Joanna, Rhaella, and Oberyn's mother. being like silent sisters.
And Chardane, they're all
And
off having
they're all on some like retirement
lemon
complex
cakes
somewhere. Yeah.
She also looks for the red door in this chapter.
Yeah.
And I think you probably like the fact that she takes comfort in reading children's stories.
Yes.
But doesn't see them as history, doesn't see them as true history.
Yeah.
But I think, with our old Nan discussions, that's something she should probably be paying attention to and may actually play a factor later on, whatever she's learning in this book. How great would that be? Children's stories from Westeros.
Yeah.
As a book.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
I was reading The Ice Dragon one night when I was at home in Ireland, and my two little nephews came in, like crawled into bed with me, and they were like, "What are you reading?" And I could show them the illustrations, but I couldn't read everything in that book because there are rape scenes in that book. But
for a children's book.
I kind of made up some of the things, but they were fascinated by it. I was like, God, I'd love children's versions. Of the stories, because they would be great. They would love them. They would absolutely love them. So when George has finished everything, I'd like children's stories, please, from Westeros. I would love that. And a Barristan Selmy biography. Thank you very much. But she thinks about the red door. She's looking for the red door. And also, you said you forgot. You thought Quaithe was in this chapter. I forgot that this was. I didn't think this happened till Dance, where she says to Missandei, "Never betray me." But it happens here, and of course, you and I both believe that Missandei will betray her. Did Jorah betray her for love? I don't think that counts because he betrayed her before he loved her.
Yeah.
So I think she shouldn't count that.
I don't think it's one of the betrayals.
I don't think so either, because he never betrayed her in his heart.
No, it was a betrayal for duty, I guess, which isn't one of the betrayals that was mentioned. So I don't know. I don't think it is for love. I think, well, Missandei, there's mention of Narth here, and this is the place where it seems like Narth is full of vegans and magic butterflies.
Oh, so it's LA.
Yeah. But visitors go and just get poisoned and feel really ill, like, within a couple of hours, I think, of being there. So the butterflies somehow magically protect the inhabitants. Doesn't Groleo betray Dany later on in the story? The guy who had the ships.
Yeah, sorry, I was pouring wine. Yes, yes. I think so, yeah.
Well, you can completely see why that would happen, considering what she did with another turtle. They turned his boat into a turtle to break the gates in Meereen for the sack of Meereen. So again, I suppose there are similarities between trying to get into Meereen and the wildlings trying to get through the gate at the wall. Do you think there's anything, and also there's mention of flies quite a bit in this chapter.
That was another quote that I highlighted.
Yeah, there's a few references to it being the dead man's revenge, and this is just kind of foreshadowing all the disease. And I'm surprised there isn't more of this at the wall. Maybe it is just because the cold preserves. I don't know, because there's
I'm in the middle of summer here. It's a daily battle between green bottles, because we're near the woods, and hornets. And I don't know what the law is. I wouldn't kill a hornet anyway, because they kill wasps. But hornets are huge. And in Germany, it's a €50,000 fine if you kill one. Because they're endangered. So I don't know what it is here in Switzerland. So I'm always worried that they're going to die in my apartment. They're smart though. They get out. Flies are not smart. Imagine being surrounded by that many flies.
Yeah.
So gross.
Yeah.
Because is it Brown Ben talks about flies in his drink or something?
Yeah. They seem to be everywhere. There's like clouds of flies flying around that she can see when she's looking at the city.
It's so horrendously mismanaged, this whole thing. And in fairness to her, she does think, if I'm going to be Aegon, I want to be the Aegon that was able to take over and bring peace and order. That's what I want to do. So she kind of wants to be a Roman emperor almost.
So she feels at the moment like she's playing at queen. She's using Marine, or she's kind of figuring that she's going to use the city, isn't she, to kind of as a training ground for being a queen. Do you think, my question to you after reading this chapter is, do you think that Dany will ever be queen of anywhere else apart from Marine?
No.
No, I don't either.
I don't think she. I had a theory years ago. I used to write little things on a forum, and I had until the season that we saw, I did genuinely believe she would go back and be the Khaleesi of Khaleesi's and go back and kind of go back to Vaes Dothrak, to all the other Khaleesi's, former Khaleesi's, and that would be her place. And she would kind of be the queen there, kind of. But I don't think Dany's going to be left with dragons at the end of this. And I don't think she's going to be queen unless she's, you could buy in, is it Tony Teflon has that theory that she might be the Night's Queen?
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah. I
don't think she can call herself queen, but unless she's coronated, even here, like, unless she's a coronation, unless everybody's on board, I don't know how she can be. The next time we see Dany, the Harpies are already in full revolt, pretty much. Yeah. So it's never going to be smooth sailing. I can see her being a queen in ASOS if she's going to survive, but I don't see Dany surviving. I don't see her surviving at all.
Yeah, I mean,
there are definite signs that people, who think that Dany might be Ned's child and Ashara Dane's child. I don't know where they get that from, but you can see in this chapter why they might think that. But a very small, tiny little group, and it doesn't. I don't.
There is one last thing that I wanted to, because I can't believe it's 20 to 10.
Oh shit! Yes, it is.
Well, there is one thing that in this chapter that I can't remember ever noticing before. When Jorah and Barristan and several other Unsullied, I think, went with them into the sewers, a huge white lizard in the sewers jumped up and like bit the leg of what, basically killed somebody, and Jorah killed this huge white lizard. I just thought, wow, that's really random. I can't remember that happening before, but it just kind of reminded me of, it's like a big lizard to me is like a dragon. But it's in the sewers. So the conclusion that I got from that was that's like Jorah it's like George and the Dragon, but like a really shitty sewer version of this happening. But it was Jorah that killed this white lizard, not Barristan the Bold.
So actually, I'm just going to double check something and then I'll let you go. House Reed, their sigil, I just wanted to double check, is a lizard eating itself.
Right.
And a white lizard, kind of a ghost lizard almost.
Yeah.
Maybe it foreshadows Jorah taking down the ghost of this story, which is Helen Reed.
Yeah, maybe.
There's something sketchy about that guy. There's going to be something sketchy about him for sure.
Yeah.
So maybe, I don't know. It's funny you say that because it did stick out to me, because he goes to attack again as well, which is interesting. Attacks, it's an underhanded attack, and he comes back, and then Jorah takes him out. Which is kind of what the show has suggested happened to Arthur Dane. That Howland Reed took an underhanded attack, stabbed him in the back. So
dishonorable.
A great chapter. Dany 6. If you haven't read it in a while, I'd recommend to go back and read it, because we won't see her for a while. And next week we only have 5 chapters, So we'll be
Okay.
much earlier.
Yes.
Claire. Jaime 9 to Jon 11. So we're rapidly coming to the end of Storm. And Feast is one of the shortest books, I think. So
Okay.
I think it is. I could be completely wrong about that.
It's just one book, isn't it? Rather than split like Storm was.
I'm actually looking at it.
Yeah, it's quite big. Yeah, I was going to say, I remember it being.
I looked at it today, and there's like 48 chapters, and it sounded, oh, that's fine. But actually, I think we're going to have to do less than 6 chapters a week when we come to Feast, because
they're quite intense chapters. Yeah.
Okay, so I will endeavor to get a Feast schedule up for next week. But for next week, for Storm of Swords, we're reading from 72 to 76. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us in the chat. And thank you again, Claire, for joining us.
You're welcome.
We will talk to you all again soon. Have a great week.
Bye.